Reactive training systems.
Well, if I could shift gears just a little bit and kind of bring our conversation toward
Mm.
training, I'm curious, is there anything to you that stands that Meg does different in her training compared to, say, like a typical client? It's kind of always hard to think of the typical because everyone that everyone is kind of individualized,
Mm.
have like coaching tendencies, and I was just kind of wondering what stands out
I
to you.
think what she does really well is takes her externals in her stride, because there is a lot. There's two kids and all the things that comes with that.
Sure.
So being able to, I think, on we get for her, she gets really good glimpses of like externals being really good, and you can see the difference in training, but not letting your mindset get too bad with when kids are sick and things like that. I think that's the biggest difference with her. And then even though she's a really patient lifter, and there was a couple of times in that prep that things weren't going her way in terms of lifting, and she was able to get over those hurdles and not let it affect confidence for the day, if that makes sense. There wasn't any, but I didn't hit this in training, or but you know, I'm worried I'm not going to hit this number. Like that's the biggest difference for her, is that compared to, someone who's just learning the sport. And that's what I meant with like the mindset was awesome. I think that's
Do you think that's, I mean, you kind of hinted already. Do you think that's kind of a function of her having been in the sport for a while,
yeah, I
or
think
is that something that's
practiced
just
it.
more
She's
intrinsic?
practiced it over and over again. Practiced the mindset during the weight cut, practiced making decisions during the weight cut because she does her own weight cut, and then really practiced her mental game before each lift. And being one thing with her is having so many different factors externally has helped her to become a more versatile athlete at the back when things don't go the way that we need, if that makes sense, like missing lifts and moving,
Just like resilient
resilience, moving
mentally?
through the competition. Yeah, really resilient and
Yeah.
improved on that dramatically. I think that's probably the biggest difference. And that has grown over years, and particularly grown within the last 2 years.
I am definitely sympathetic to the idea that, the uh, being in the sport for a while confers some advantages
Yeah.
and areas like that. Helps with, I mean, just decision making. You've seen some of it before, and you've been down different paths before, and you can kind of, you know, make smarter choices, hopefully, and that can lead to better outcomes. The gains can be harder to come by from a physical
Mhm.
sense, but if you can make better decisions, then you can still find
Yeah,
them.
definitely. Definitely.
That she is a mom of like small twins is also really impressive, because
Yeah.
I remember like she, after having twins, she went back on the platform. Eventually, she also started working with you, coach. Like you also need a different kind of patience when it comes to that, because she's dealing with different
Yeah.
externals
Mm.
um, that she can't necessarily change. But how did you manage to like give her the space, like create a space where you keep encouraging her while also being a mom at the same time, and becoming so competitive and still as consistent as possible as a lifter?
I think it started way back from the start. Meg's first go to is to bury her head and not talk about anything. So, really encouraging her to be able to talk, with what's going on, and getting her to be comfortable with doing that has been great, and being okay with not being okay. So, I think it's just we reach each other on a good personal level. Not all the talk is about training. Sometimes we're not talking about training for days. So it's understanding your athlete. For me, it's understanding the athlete on a life level, not just a training level, and also understanding for athletes such as her that some weeks aren't going to be as great as others, and it's taking advantages of the weeks that are really good and building upon them, I think. And then I think, I don't know, we haven't spoken about this, but this is kind of just what I'm gathering is just having boundaries, like, around what what's expected of each phase and what the athlete needs in each phase, if that makes sense. So I think it's more of an understanding on a personal level, not so much a, a coach athlete level, understanding what that person's going through, I think is the biggest thing there.
This sounds similar. Well, you had a post recently where you were talking about some of your own personal growth over the last year, and we're going to get into this a little bit when we start talking about business related topics, but I suppose this is as good a time as any. It sounds like there's a bit of overlap here, that some of the growth that you've seen in Meg mirrors some of the things that you were talking about, like your own personal growth. Does that
I think so. Yeah,
sound
I
right?
think so. I
That's
think
awesome.
coaching an athlete as high a level as her has helped me grow as a person and as a coach. And I think once you see like athletes at that level training and working through those things on paper or personally, I think has helped me to not so much not put pressure on myself, but know that things aren't going to go right all the time. And it's the decisions that you make in those times that help you grow as a coach. And then, I think it's just important for anyone to continue to have a growth mindset, not only in business, but in your personal life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sound like you're feeling less anxious about stuff like that, things are going to go wrong. We know that, but we also trust that the tools to deal with it when it
Yep.
happens.
Yeah,
That's
I've
accurate
learned
as
to
well?
really back my decisions. I think going through, getting better at international competitions and coaching at international competitions has helped me to really back the decisions that I make, and then also seeking outside opinion. So reaching out to the coaches around me, talking a lot to other coaches and things like that helps me grow as a coach, because it's you if there's that saying, if you think you know it all, then you don't know anything, right? So continuing to seek
Sure.
learning for me, I think, is really important. And I think one thing that I've really embrace this year is learning about myself as a person is making me a better coach, and like
That's
what I need.
interesting. Is there an example that you can share that's kind of along those lines? Put you on the spot.
Looking after myself, you know, like, and making sure that I'm present for myself so then I can be present for those around me. So getting 8 hours of sleep, getting off my phone, keeping my phone time down, going to work into work when I know that I'm at my best, and then working from home when I'm not. Things like that. Asking people if they're okay, telling people if I'm not okay. Like, and treating my athletes as human beings. I think, sometimes I won't get to all my messages in a day, and I'll just be like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'll get back to you tomorrow." You know what I mean? Like, and having the conversation when you first meet an athlete, saying, these are my strengths and these are my weaknesses,
Right.
and not trying to be perfect all the time. I think, Gabby, you can attest to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is big what you're saying, because like I've learned so much from you, and really see you as a coach who has a really high expertise when it comes to programming. But then
Mm,
again, like there's way more to it, that you also like you try to meet athletes' needs when it comes to their personal life as well. You're not
yep.
just an AI who types out a program, right? You actually
Yeah.
need to create a space
Yep.
for another human being, so you get to communicate with them. And I think for a lot of athletes, this is really important, because I, as an athlete, and as a coach, I know how to write my own program, Of course, it's nice to have someone who is not biased in the same way, who is more objective. But at the end of the day, I also just want to have someone to share my journey with,
Yep.
which is also nice, you know. So I think it's really great that you're able to meet Meg where she's at, because ultimately this helps her to become the best version of herself as an athlete.
Yeah, and I think we really value each other as human beings, and I think that's really helped a lot. And like I don't know about you guys, but I work with people that I really get along with, and I think one thing that I've grown to know is that you can't force relationships. If you get better at choosing the types of athletes that work, or the types of coaches that work really well with you, and those long-standing relationships, if they're meant to continue, the ones that grow together. And I think that's relationships in general. I think online coaching, those who have been around a while now know that it is a different ball game to doing any face-to-face work. So I started on face-to-face, so it was quite challenging for me to transition over, and it took me a good 2 years to really learn how to do that. And there's certain tricks that make online coaching a lot easier, which is things like having your workday planned out, doing the same thing every day when it comes to programming and stuff, when having your workflow set, having your response time set properly, making sure that your phone is on do not disturb permanently. That was a big one for me. Because then work becomes work when you want, when you've got to do your work, not just constantly sitting there on your phone. I think that was a big turning point. Gabby was one of the ones that helped me to really know that, because she was really big on boundaries when I coached her. So it was a learning curve for me to understand to continue to work on my own boundaries.
That's a thing that I think lots of coaches struggle with, and I love that you were talking about the kind of some of the difficulties in coaching in an online
Yeah,
setting. I would imagine that extends to a lot of remote work.
I think so.
Just that,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there is a skill set to it, and
Yep.
it can be kind of hard to put your finger on. The degree to which you need to self-manage is just way higher. It's
Yep.
just way higher. And some people just really struggle with that. They're not bad people or anything like that. There's a skill to learn, but I think that there's a personality that goes along with it
Yeah.
too. I've worked with some people who have really struggled with that, and it can show up like a difficulty setting boundaries in both
Yep.
directions, setting personal boundaries and professional
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. And but failure on either end leads to, like, if the only thing you cared about was like the work product, failure on either side of the boundaries leads to inferior work
Yep.
product. Just because you could end up exhausted or distracted or something like that, there's still performance that has to
Yep.
happen.
Yeah,
You just hit the nail on the head.
that's true. And also, if you
Well,
create very high expectations of yourself,
Yes.
you push those expectations onto your athletes. So you kind of teach them
Yep.
like what to expect from you. But if that's not sustainable, and also like your workflow is something that can always change,
Yeah.
because as you also grow personally, like you might be dealing with other stuff in life during different phases. So it's not always consistent, but if you manage to keep it consistent as possible in work, you just need to adapt. It's like working with RPE, if you're not honest with
Yeah.
yourself, it's not gonna work. You need to
Yep.
auto-regulate your online coaching as well.
Yeah,
And
and
you really need to know yourself as a coach, as a person.
yep, and you're completely right. Workflow develops over time. So I'm in the middle of changing my workflow again, because I'm at a point now where I think I need to stop working weekends. So I want to change my workflow. And I think, my athletes that work under me now, and any athletes in general, once you've developed that relationship, they're the first ones who are going to go, great, have an excellent weekend. You know what I mean? So kind of having to develop those systems for me now and understanding when it's time, because like, I don't know, like it would be very millennial of me to say, I've paid my dues and, now I get to have a weekend, but because everyone's different, right? You don't have to work 1,000 million hours just so you can have a weekend off. But I feel like for me, now I'm able to reflect on what's going to make me a better coach, and having time for myself really makes me a better coach. Having time where I'm not thinking about competitions and programs and powerlifting is really important because it helps me clear my head. So understanding that I, need now a weekend off, not because I, need to escape. It's more so I can be more present. I think that's really important, and it stops the guilt around, oh, I'm taking a day off, because as an online coach, taking a day off is a luxury, like we really have to plan that. And I think it's just at the time now where there's no guilt involved. I just know it's the best decision for me.
I like how this connects back to something you said about you and Meg, your preparation for Sheffield
Yep.
as well, where you were talking about how you stayed focused on what you were doing, followed your own game plan, tried not to get too caught up in the swirl of the lifts other people were hitting, which, I've talked about before. Like, I think that's a huge potential trap, is to get caught up in that, and they can affect the likelihood that pushes you toward bad decision in training that has, negative repercussions on your performances. It's definitely there. And I'm not sure that ignoring the competition makes things any worse at all.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't think too many people just, drastically underperform because, they're focused on their own training. I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good decision. And, it sounds like the approach that you're taking to like managing your work is born of a similar mindset. And it's cool to see symmetries and things like that. And I relate to the idea that from time to time you have to rework like your whole workflow. In the beginning, I kind of, would design my workflow, and it reminds me of like when I first started like writing training programs when I was a teenager, and you think that you're going to write the perfect program that you're just going to run forever. I'm going to design my workflow, and this is just going to be the way that I work. Like, no, that works for a while, and then you have to rework it. It's always
Something
this
always gets in the way.
iterative process. Yeah, I've eventually made my peace with that as
Yeah,
well.
I know. And yeah, it's just understanding that like all you can do is set yourself up for you know, how you're performing right now, and then understand that it's not going to be like that, because what life changes, and life changes around a workflow. So especially with the more responsibilities we have as a human being.
Hey, let me tell you something that I know about you. Your lifting is important to you. It's probably one of your biggest priorities. And for people like us, nothing compares to the feeling that you get when you set a new PR. That feeling of being the best that you've ever been, of doing something that you've never done before. This is what we're all after, and it's also what RTS specializes in. Getting you the absolute best program possible so that you can hit new PRs and reach your goals. We call it radically individualized training, and we're really good at it. Whether we need to account for busy schedules or equipment limitations, or precisely turn the dials and get the details of the program just right, we have the tools and the experience to guide your lifting to the next level. To us, coaching is all about leadership, relationship, and creative problem solving. A coach should be poised to help you make tough decisions about training and competing so that you can continually grow in your development. And of course, a coach should be a first-rate problem solver, especially when it comes to your training, technique, and strategy. Now, all this has to be built off of a really strong professional coaching relationship that emphasizes trust and respect. Additionally, RTS coaches are not on an island. We have a strong network of professionals to reach out to, so if you find yourself in need of some specific expertise, say in the realm of nutrition or injury management or sports psychology, there's a deep expertise available there too. For more information, go to store.reactivetrainingsystems.com and click on coaching. That's store.reactivetrainingsystems.com, then click on coaching. Hope to see you on the team soon.